you've just settled down and you're maybe reading a book, or maybe you're playing a game on your tablet or watching a movie, and the doorbell rings. And you have a flashback to last week when the doorbell rang, and it was a local school kid selling subscriptions that you didn't want and you didn't need, but you kind of felt obligated to buy because, well, it's your local school and really you should do your part to support them. But you get to the door and it's not someone selling something. In fact, it's someone delivering something. It's a package. You take the package, you sign for it, and as you walk inside, you notice that it's from your grandmother. Now you're excited because, maybe she sent you something really good, because she has before. You go in, you get a pair of scissors, you open up the package, and inside is a scrapbook making kit. Except that you don't scrapbook. Now, all of this has taken maybe 10 minutes. And in the space of those 10 minutes, you have felt a lot of things. You felt irritation at the interruption. You felt a little bit of dread as you were going to the door. You felt surprised when you got to the door and saw that it wasn't what you expected. You felt excitement over your guess at what was in the package. And then you felt disappointment over what was actually in the package, and some confusion about why your grandmother would send you something unrelated to any of your interests. And maybe you even felt a little bit of guilt, because sometimes we feel guilty for our emotions when we really don't need to. All this over the doorbell ringing. Now, in the last video, I talked about the fact that people are complex packages. They're a little bit of everything. And the better we know them, the more of that package we see. Well, if people are complex packages, then the emotions that we feel about them are also complex packages. The same person that you love can really irritate you, or you can get genuinely angry at them about something. Or maybe they've hurt your feelings and now you're sad. This is difficult because, once again, so much in our culture is telling us that emotions are simple. We should love something, or we should hate it, or we should be angry, or we should be sad. We're told we should feel certain ways about certain relationships in our lives. I know that when I was struggling with, in the early years of dealing with the abuse, I was very, very angry at God because of what happened to me. I had been taught that God is in control of everything. And I had been taught that nothing happens outside of God's will. And I was very, very confused and angry because I couldn't imagine that God would want what happened to me to happen. And I'll never forget, I was actually camping with my mom and my toddler daughter, and I happened to encounter the resident counselor at the camp. A lot of the year-round campgrounds in the South have either a pastor or a counselor that does church services and is there, in case people need them, and started talking. And I said, I'm just so angry with God. And she looked at me and said, "It's okay. God can take it." And it was a huge moment for me to realize that I could be angry at God, because all my life I'd been told, you shouldn't be angry at God. You're supposed to love God. But that it was okay. God could take it. And that kind of opened a door for me as I realized that you can feel multiple things about your spirituality, about the people you care about issues in your life. You can feel a lot of different things. You see, when we watch the Disney movies and the Disney princess meets her prince and goes off to live happily ever after, you don't hear about her being irritated because he left his socks on the floor by the bed. Or you don't hear about the big fight they had that left her sobbing because she couldn't understand why, he couldn't understand why she was so upset. So much of our popular culture tells us that we're supposed to feel one way about one thing. If it's bad, we're supposed to feel angry or sad or righteous fury or compassion for victims. If it's something good, of course we're supposed to be happy. They don't tell us that we're supposed to have mixed feelings. And the same thing kind of, so often our parents also pass on those messages. Sometimes it's subtly, just passing on what was passing on to them. Sometimes they come out, right out and say, you shouldn't feel that way. An example I live with still is my feelings toward my mother. I love my mom. I really do. She's a great lady. I hate my mom. She's a total bitch. And both of those feelings are 100% real. And they're my feelings. Now, there are people in my life that have only ever seen the good side of my mom and would be appalled to learn about the negative feelings I have for her. There are also people in my life who have almost exclusively seen the harsh, super critical, mean-spirited mom. And they can't understand why I even bother to talk to her, much less go and visit her and spend time with her every year. Because they only see part of the picture. I see a bigger picture of my mom, in part because she's my mom, but in part because I've known her a lot longer. And it's not always comfortable feeling both things. There are days when I'm reminded of something my mom has done that was hurtful, and I'm not feeling exactly good when she calls. Then there are other days that I'm feeling happy, and somebody brings up one of the things that I don't like to think about, and once again, those conflicting feelings. I can honestly tell you that there are days that I don't want to have anything to do with my mom, and I could cheerfully never see her again. I will also tell you that as the mother of a child with a lifelong, very serious chronic illness, when my child has a relapse, my mom's the first one I call. Because ironically, in that moment, she is always the biggest source of comfort for me. All the same person. It's even more of an extreme with my cousin. The range of feelings that I had for him. And it's complex, and emotions can surprise us. When I was in my mid-20s, I'd been in therapy for a couple years. And at that point, I was seeing an individual private therapist, and I was also going to group therapy. And one of the things that people said to me was, you should be angry at your cousin. Here's the thing. I wasn't. I was angry at what he did to me because I was starting to realize what it had cost me, both in terms of my childhood and my adulthood. And that was just the beginning. I was angry about that, and that anger often motivated me to tackle issues that I wanted to shy away from. I didn't want to give him any more than he'd already taken. But I wasn't angry at him, and people kept telling me, you should be angry at him. I have to tell you that if somebody told me now how I should feel about something, odds are I wouldn't say a word. I would just look at them until they just stopped saying nonsense. Because there are times for all of us that we push emotions aside, that we repress them for the moment because it's not a good time. We're not ready to deal with them. And sometimes if we push them down too far and for too long, it goes into depression, and then we really have to dig them out. But sometimes we just don't react the way people think we should react. See, when it comes to your emotions, what you feel is complex, and there is no should or shouldn't. So at that point, I wasn't angry at my cousin, but my husband, my first husband, and I, we were making a trip up to Virginia Beach, which is where I grew up and lived my entire life until I was about 19 years old. And I said to him, I'd like to go to my cousin's grave. And I really expected that I would go to see my cousin's grave and I would have this great cathartic moment. I would see his grave and I would feel this fury, and the anger that I was supposed to feel would finally come out. So I kind of warned my husband, not expecting to get angry. So we went, and I'll tell the whole story of my cousin's death later. But what you need to know for this is that my cousin is buried in a cemetery that is beautiful. It's beautifully landscaped, trees, benches, flower beds. It's beautiful. My cousin wasn't buried in a beautiful section. You see, at the time he died, my aunt and uncle had no money, and he was buried compliments of the cemetery. So he was buried all the way in a barren back corner. No tombstone, just a little plaque set in the ground that said, Thomas Joseph Akery, 1957 to 1974. And what I felt when I saw that was not anger. It was shock to realize that he was 17 years old when he died. See, I'd done the math. I knew he was 13 when he assaulted me. But it never really registered. He was 13, and then he died when he was 17. I was only in my 20s, and I knew at 17 I'd barely been a person, much less really understanding what I was doing. And all I could think was, what has to happen to a child to turn him into a monster? How awful it must have been for him. And I just sat there on the ground by the gravestone, and I wept. And I wept. And I wept. Because all I could feel was sorrow for the boy that I had loved, for the boy that had become a monster, and because of later events, became demonized in our family. By the time I got around to telling people what he'd done to me, he was already considered a psychopath. But really, he was a kid. And I didn't feel anger. Now, at the anniversary of his death every year, what I feel mostly is sorrow. Sorrow for the boy that I loved. Sorrow for my loss and for his loss. And for a lot of years that confused me, because emotions can surprise us. And I kind of fought against it, but last year I actually bought myself a bracelet. It's garnets, and they're shaped like hearts, and it reminds me that it's okay that I loved my cousin, and it's okay that I mourn for his lost childhood as well as my own. See, how we act, that's what matters. How we feel is often complex and confusing. And it's really confusing when you've been abused as a child, because most abuse happens to a child by someone that they already love and trust. So on to a base of love and trust, you now have fear, terror, anger, confusion, shame, a whole host of emotions that, if you think they're hard to sort out as an adult, it's so much worse as a child, because a child's perspective really, it can really twist things around to fit their very immature and distorted worldview. So, whatever you're feeling, not just about people who have hurt you, but the people in your everyday life, it's okay if you're confused. It's okay if you feel a lot of things that are conflicting. Your emotions are yours. My emotions are mine. There are things that might scare someone, but make me laugh. There are things that would scare me that somebody else would look at and go, I don't get it. There are people I love that other people look at and go, I don't understand. And there are people I don't like that other people go, this is a perfectly nice person. Why don't you like them? Our feelings are our own. And like the people we have them for, our feelings are complex and they're package deals. Some feelings will be stronger than others. And when we know how we feel, we can make choices if we want to act on those feelings. But whether you love someone or hate them, or a little of both, whether someone makes you laugh or they make you cry, or a bit of both, your emotions, your reactions belong to you. But whatever you're feeling, always remember that clothing is optional, consent is not.